Aloha, everybody. I'm Joe Imhoff, and I wear many hats, just like Sarah does. I'm the owner of Haleakalā Biochar, co-owner. I'm also the program manager for the Skyline Conservation Initiative, and I'm also an advisor to the Kula Community Watershed Alliance. I'm a 20-year native habitat restoration practitioner, and my talk today is about benefits and challenges of processes of wood chipping, mulching, biochar, and composting. To start it off, I'll talk a little bit about my experience doing landscape scale restoration work. This is Haleakalā. These are the different kind of conservation zones that are happening. This is kind of the edge of the Waikamoe Preserve. And this is like 7,000 acres of fenced, protected native watershed. This is where we get all of the drinking water and the resources from Haleakalā. The area in blue, that's Pu'upahu Reserve, and that's basically all the boundary lands between Haleakalā Ranch and Haleakalā National Park. We had a horrific wildfire in July, and 500 acres of this reserve burned, and it's subalpine shrublands. Really sad, we lost a lot of sandalwood, Iliaki forest, Mamane forest, but this was the Crater Road fire, and it burnt for like 3-4 weeks last year. This is the site that I've been restoring here, Haleakalā Gulch. It's two different streams that come together right at that point, become one stream, and it goes down. The night of August 8th, 2023, when Lahaina had the horrible fire, we had 5 total fires that happened: Pelehu, Olinda, and the Kula fire. The Kula fire burnt 26 homes, and it came within a half a mile of our site. It stopped. We stopped it with a fire break right there in the wattle forest. So we've had a horrible fire below us, a horrible fire above us, but that's what we're restoring. This line of trees is eucalyptus. Some of the biggest trees on Haleakalā. They're huge, and they're dying out right now because of a beetle infestation. And when you drive up Crater Road, you just see this mega forest of really dead trees, and we're in the dead center of it. And that's where my restoration experience for 20 years has kind of been happening. And when we talk about reef-friendly landscaping, it starts on the mauna. Everything in Kula and Haleakalā is a drainage, and all of the soil in heavy rains, like the rains just sheet off the mountain and it sheets into the big steep valleys. And this goes all the way to Kealia Pond. Hapapa Gulch goes all the way into Kihei. When Kihei mud flows, it's literally from Hapapa Gulch. So every bit of Haleakalā is a watershed. And if you don't protect the watershed, all the soil runs right off into the reef. And all the fertilizers and all the pesticides and everything that humans impact on the landscape goes into those drainages and it drains out. So my experience has been doing as much as I can to protect it at the top, so that you guys have a good chance at the bottom for a more healthy system. This is that line of trees in the forest. You can see how it's all kind of silver. This was 2018, a drone picture. This is all koa, sandalwood, ohia forest that we started restoring from about here to there. And as those trees die out, we are having a big issue. And so then we decided to blast a big hole. We got some county funding. We did massive tree cutting work. We had no idea that we're actually creating a fire break, but we made a huge fire break in the dead forest. And you can see, like, this looks good, this looks bad, but that's all native. And then the Kula fire basically stopped right there, but it burnt 300 acres. And then there was like 2,000 acres of Pelehu that burned that night. Just for perspective. So this is Haleakalā Gulch. It was plugged up with wattle and eucalyptus, and then we cut it all out. But you can't leave all the wood in the gulch, because that'll shoot rockets when the river flows, because the gulches are really, really steep, yeah? So then we spent a bunch of money, hoisted all the wood out of the gulch, and we're doing this, like a lot of people that live on the gulch huck all the rubbish into the gulch, right? So we've been like spending the money to get it out of the gulch, because that's what's supposed to happen. And it's worth it, it's amazing. But here's some before and after. This is our koa forest that was planted in about 2017 with eucalyptus, and that's like in the gulch. And then the after is all the eucalyptus disappeared. So it's like heavy, large-scale work that we're doing. Some of the most large-scale clear-cut forestry that's ever happened on Haleakalā. I never in my life thought that I would be like a logger chainsaw guy, but I made cuts like that for 6 months straight, and we did a lot of it. This is what the gulch looks like, a major, major, major disturbance, but it's what it takes to mechanically rip all the, it's one thing for grass, but this is like the worst weeds that suck all the groundwater. And when you talk about invasive species, there's ecosystem modifiers, and eucalyptus sucks all the water dry, and it's really bad on the landscape. So it takes this level of activity. So what we do is we grind as much as we can through these mega grinders and mulchers and broadcast it into the soil. And this post-eucalyptus, we didn't have a fire here, but it's almost like the similar conditions after a wildfire of just a massive disturbance with like powdery, dusty soils. The best thing you can do is to lock that soil in with a heavy, heavy application of mulch. And all these scientists are like, oh, you can't put mulch on a slope. Well, this slope is like that, and we have like this much mulch, and in all the heavy Kona storms, it's all perfect. Like none of it is blown out. So it's like just proof is in the pudding and trial by application. And if people try to contradict and say, yeah, you shouldn't put mulch on a slope, I'm like, rah, come check it out. We've done it.
Those guys work for Army Corps.
What guys?
Those guys that say that.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not just them. I mean, I've heard NRCS say it. I've heard everybody say it. So this is kind of what we do to stabilize, right? We're not running like the big logs through the chippers, but you can use those to terrace and actually slow the rainwater down. Because if you slow the water, it's more likely to percolate and actually fill up an aquifer. But if you don't, it goes faster. Like if you just have bare soils, the water hits it, it sheets off, and it picks up speed as it goes downhill. So what we want to do is literally stop it and slow it, stop it, slow it. And use as much of the mulch as you can, because that creates like the sponge. And during the dead of summer, you can go through when we've had droughts for years, and you can scrape through the 4 or 6 inches of mulch, and it's like super wet. And all of the habitat restoration has 0 irrigation, which is amazing. We have no water bill whatsoever. So this is just kind of another like logs and wood chips. The reason why we're doing it this dense is because we have this gigantic forest around, and what are we going to do with all the wood? If we leave big piles, it's going to be a big mess. So NRCS restoration practitioners said, yes, you can lay the logs individually on the soil. They'll decompose over time, and they'll become like waterlogged sponges. And it's actually beneficial for a lot of things. This is what it looks like from space, and it's super cool. We've done these like log designs, but basically this is a drainage, and this is kind of like a gulch. And what we did was we took the logs and we pivoted them like that. So when the water sheets down, it trickles, and it doesn't speed up. It splits and it slows it down. So there's a method to it. The second step is to protect. You cannot plant any native plants in these environments without fences, because deer will eat everything. And we noticed that right after the pandemic, deer came in and destroyed 2,500 of our understory plants. So then I wrote a bunch of grants, and we fenced off 46 acres, kicked the deer out, and now we can resume planting. But I don't know if they're at coastal Kaanapali yet, but I know Wailea, there's deer going through the lobby at the Fairmont Kealani at like 4 in the morning. Like the deer are, ecologically speaking, the deer here are a more disaster than the wildfires, because they're expanding every single day. They're eating plants every day. Each deer can have 2 litters every single year. Their population doubles every 3 to 4 years. In 1954, we started with 8 deer on Maui. Now we have over 250,000. And by those numbers, within 30 years, we're gonna have over 1 million deer on the mountain. And I know the deer are now like at the windmills on West Maui, and they're moving their way over. Have you guys noticed any deer like in Kaanapali yet? Yeah. So they're coming. It's just a matter of time. So get ready to fence. It's unfortunate that like Maui's ecosystems can't recover on their own. They need humans management for their existence. And fencing to keep the animals out is really the most, it's so expensive, but it's so essential. And when people ask me like, hey, I want to do native habitat in my property, I'm like, what's your fencing strategy? And they're like, well, we don't have one. I'm like, don't do anything until you fence first. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for heartbreak. So second step is to protect. Then you can restore. And this is the fun part. Everybody gets to come and plant trees. And we've had 17,000 volunteers come up since 2002 to the Haleakalā Gulch. There's a zipline tour operation going on right there. And it's amazing. People get connected to the ecological identity of what Maui should be, kind of like what Sarah was saying. And you know, we're so disconnected from native habitat. Like I drove from Piahola Road all the way out here to be here today. I saw very few native plants, and I drove all the way across Maui. So even local people born and raised are disconnected from the forest that should have been here thousands of years ago, and it breaks my heart. And that's why it's so important to bring it back at the resorts and everywhere that we possibly can, protect it and bring people in so that we can bring back that that connection. So this is 4 years after like a little baby planting, and look at the size of those plants. You know, those were little tiny keikis. There was zero irrigation at the site, and we have very little rain, and it's all because of the thick mulch in the wood chips. And here's another thing, scientists are like, oh, you can't use eucalyptus wood chips because they're acidic and allelopathic. That's bull. We grind it and cover it, and like the day after we put fresh eucalyptus mulch, we put 1,000 natives in the ground. We had zero collateral damage from acidity from eucalyptus wood chips. And the eucalyptus, you can see how dead and gnarly they are in the background there. They're predispositioned to suck and hold on to water, right? Because they come from a desert climate, so there's not much water, so they just grab it all and they hold on to it. And when we cut them down, like water comes pouring out of it, it's crazy. But the wood chips do the same thing. It holds on to way more moisture. So the moisture retention of a eucalyptus wood chip greatly outweighs any sort of acidity. And in a eucalyptus environment, that soil is as acidic as it will ever be. It's like the worst possible conditions. So if you take that and grind it like hulihia and turn it into amazing mulch, and the moisture retention will immediately start to create benefits. So this is 10 years after the planting, and this is what I'm talking about. Like this is what the indigenous Kanaka Maoli would recognize as home, right? If they were to go in a time machine and show up in Maui today and be walking around and be like, where am I? I'm in Australia or I'm in Africa, you know? But like until you get to this kind of an environment where they'd be like, wow, no, this is it. And we've lost that. But we can bring it back. I've been bringing it back up on the mountain where people come on a zipline tour and volunteers, but we can bring it back at the resorts. And it's starting to happen more frequently, but I think there's a major, major opportunity to get people connected with what makes Maui so special and the Hawaiian Islands so special. It's not the exotic, random palm trees from here or there or whatever. It's like the Hawaiian trees, and people really want to see that kind of stuff. So here's our stream, Haleakalā Gulch. This one flooded into Kailua Pond, and it took half the soil with it. Hapapa Gulch flooded into North Kihei, and you end up with this much mud in the streets, and it's literally from the mountain. And our restoration site, look at the color of the water like 10 years later. It really works. When you put the logs and the chips and the native plants, like that soil stays in kula. And I went swimming in a clear stream like this day, and it was amazing. It was really cold, but I had to jump in, and you know, the elementals are like, thank you for doing the hard work. And this is what it looks like, is a clear waterfall. And if Maui in its original state, Sarah showed the photo of the ecological conditions, those days, the ocean flash floodwaters were crystal clear. If you have a healthy river watershed, all the soils get trapped into the ecosystem, and the flash floods would be crystal clear. but it's not that case these days. Like Maui Harbor is like mud for miles, and it's crazy. But if I had like all the money in the world and Oprah's money and Jeff Bezos' money, and like I would do this level of restoration work on every single gulch from the mountain to the ocean, and then our reef would be like way more healthy. At our site, native birds showed up, and that's another telltale that we're doing good work. Apapane Amakihi showed up in 2015, and these guys showed up March 3rd, 2023. They're flying all around right next to the zipline check-in building, and we're like, what? Yeah, woo! You know, that's why we do this. It's not just for us, it's for them. And, you know, they're...
really happy you were taking us photos.
Yeah. We're also a seed source for native trees and shrubs because of those fires. All these are sandalwood seeds from the Santalum Haleakalā, and those are native to only the slopes of Haleakalā, the only place on the planet. In our Ahupua'a, where that Crater Road fire happened, we've been collecting seeds for 20 years from 17 trees that are left. That fire just burnt 15 out of those 17 trees, so there's only 2 wild ones left. We have 450 of them at our site that are putting out thousands of seeds. So now we can propagate and put them back into the burn zones. And now that the Kula fire came up, we can propagate them and spread them down the mountain. And hopefully someday they'll be planting themselves all the way down to Haleakalā Pond if you restore the ecosystem correctly. And that's why it's so important. All the plants that we put are from Kula genetics. We're not taking Monica Halavi and bringing it to Kula. We're really trying to maintain the ecological integrity of the genetics. Same thing here, like up in the mountain up above Lahaina, Kaanapali, there's some forests up there, and I have access to some gulches, and we're collecting seeds from the forests up there. We can regenerate them and plant them in Kaanapali resorts too. So that's why it's super important when you have the fires that would otherwise disappear. We have a living seed orchard that we can source from. And now with the Kula Community Watershed Alliance has raised funds, and they built a huge nursery facility. And we're gonna start mass producing native plants so that we can plant all over Haleakalā, especially in the burn scars. So here's the fire that happened. Really horrible, 26 homes burned in Kula. Obviously Lahaina had a really horrible situation, but we're just gonna look at the Haleakalā fire. 200 acres of forest burnt, and this is the forest that burnt monotypic wattle, Australian black wattle. There's no biodiversity. It's one kind of a tree. It's allelopathic, and it kills all the other kind of native plants, and it creates just massive amounts of fuel. And this fire burnt for 6 months. The Lahaina fire, like Sarah said, it was like a grass fire, and it burnt all the structures. This was a wildland forest fire, and because of all the wattle fuels, and because everybody for 30 years like cut all the wood and threw it in the gulch, the fires were like big emu pits, like under their properties, just burning and burning and burning. And there was a flare up in December from that same fire. So it was like really intense. So the soil stabilization is really essential. See the colors, there's a lot of ash. And a lot of the soil from this photo is in Haleakalā Pond, or actually on the reef right now, because we've lost a lot. So the Kula Community Watershed Alliance was founded based on those principles. We brought all the fire survivors from the fire up to the Skyline site just to show them, not necessarily like you have to do this, but here's one example. We've been in the neighborhood building this forest system. And then we walked through time of like, oh, here's a 4-year forest, here's a 10-year forest, here's a 15-year forest, and then everybody's like crying, and they're like, we want this. So that's how this program was formed, was of all the fire survivors that wanted to create basically this vision that's in this image of a healthy watershed in the post-wildfire disaster. We created these really simple steps: stabilize, which is to just lock the soil in to keep it from blowing out, as step one. Then to protect it with fences, because it's pointless to plant anything if deer are gonna come in the next day and eat it. Then you can restore. And then the longest term part of this is the maintenance, because you wanna make sure that that plant has a fighting chance to grow. And once you reoccupy the landscape with natives, that's when weeds are easier to suppress. Like as the restoration happens, like you got to throw a lot of labor at it until like the 5, 10, 15-year mark. Eventually it's 100% native, and it's like giving CPR to a system that can grow and get better over time. And that's what we're talking about, a regenerative system. And this is kind of like big scale, fix the entire river kind of stuff. But you can take these practices and you can hyper focus them on your own little square landscape that you're working on. But here's a test plot that we did in the burn scar. There was actually hot spots while we were doing this work, but we wanted to test it out to see if it would work in a post-wildfire landscape. So we laid the logs, we ground all the mulch the gulch. That's our tagline at the moment. But it really helps and it really works. And actually, like there was known hot spots that we put wood chips on top of, and I was freaking out because I'm like, we're putting wood on top of coals, But what we did was we ran sprinklers and we moistened the soil, and then we put wood chips on it, and then we ran sprinklers again to moisten it again. We pushed that moisture down, and we actually extinguished the fire with these practices. Because with the allelopathic soils that happen in eucalyptus and wattle environments, it doesn't let water go down. It literally, like if you hose water on the soil, it'll sit there till it evaporates. And you go down, it's just bone dry underneath. So the firefighters had a hard time even extinguishing with the fire hoses because all the water just sat at the surface. So this was a practice to actually push the moisture down, and it was a firefighting practice that we just kind of figured it out. So let's get into why we're here today. I just wanted to give you kind of my personal experience with this stuff, but let's talk about wood chipping, because I'm personally responsible for hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of wood chips being broadcast all over the landscape. So it's great for moisture retention. So great, like you can literally have zero irrigation bill with wood chips if you do it right. It stabilizes the topsoil, so it keeps the soils from blowing out, especially on slopes. Weed suppression, so good at that. It needs to be at least 3 inches thick. If you just do a sprinkle coat, the weeds are like, hey, thank you, and they explode through it, but you want to get it thick enough to where the seeds are kind of like pushed down. And we noticed that after the wattle forest burned, there was such a seed bank of the wattle for 30, 40, 50 years. It exploded with a flush of invasive weeds. That explosion, if left untouched, will become a more dangerous fire hazard than the fire that burned, because every tree is a centimeter apart and it's like everywhere. And that test plot area that we sprinkled all the wood chips on, there was like no wattle regrowth, but all the way around it was just this like crazy amount. So we were able to really show how much weed suppression it helps. Also for the long-term soil health, you're building this whole microbiome that lives underneath, and all the little critters come alive. It's great for fire fuels reduction in areas that in Hawaii we have just hardwoods everywhere, and we can honor those species. Somebody planted them here because they thought that they would make tannins for tanning leather in the 1800s. That's why they brought wattle, is because of the oils that are in it. We don't really have a leather industry here in Maui these days, so it's not really used for its intended purpose. And it's like literally the most invasive acacia plant on the planet. If you Google it, it's like drying up the entire water system of South Africa. It's like really, really horrible stuff. So you can turn invasive species into a value-added product, but you need to kilo, because the last thing you want to do is grind a wattle tree that's full of brown seeds through a wood chipper and export it to your friend's house, because you're basically planting wattle trees all over Maui. So we're really like, pay attention to what you're doing. You could do more harm than good. And that's why stuff like, I'll get into this a little bit later, but composts and wood chips that come from municipal areas sometimes are loaded with weeds. And I know this guy who has like a 4-acre organic farm, and he imported a bunch of Maui Eco's wood chips and compost, and there's so many weeds that exploded all over his property from that. He basically planted a weed forest. Now he's herbiciding everything, and he's no longer organic because he literally impregnated his soils with stuff. And now there's biosecurity with like coconut rhinoceros beetles. Like, do not buy wood chips from Oahu. Like if you go to Home Depot or whatever, just don't even do it. There's a lot of local resources available, so really, really know your source because you don't want to do more harm than good. There's really good stuff from using that, but you need to know where the source comes from. So there's some challenges of wood chipping. It's expensive to hire the contractors to do it. I mean, our budgets that we're writing are in outer space, but the fundraising is huge because we're reducing fire fuels, but it's a lot of money to actually turn a forest into wood chips. But it's also dangerous if you just like get a bunch of volunteers and you have a wood chipper, like the movie Fargo, like get sucked into the wood chipper. It's happened. I was working with a whole group of like 40 volunteers after the Haleakalā fire, and I wasn't the leader of the program, but it was chaos. And I actually shut the whole thing down because people were like being really dangerous, and me knowing who I am, I'm like, stop, let's talk about safety, stand in a straight line and hand the wood there so it comes straight into the wood chipper, because it was like nuts. So it's loud if you do it in a neighborhood, like people complain. Spreading wood chips with the machine is expensive, meaning after you have big piles, you either have a tractor that has to scoop it or skid steers, so you can damage the soil that way. If you do it with the bucket brigade, you need 50 to 100 people to like spread buckets, or just a couple people for a long time. So it's just a lot of like heavy stuff and move it, and you know what I mean. So beware of spreading invasive weeds. Definitely don't import anything from off island. We have what we need here. And even I think on the west side, there's a lot of wood chip resources because of after the fire. Yeah, and talk to Dwayne, he knows all the west side people. I know a lot of the stuff on Haleakala side, but definitely don't start moving stuff everywhere. Use what get locally. So now we're gonna talk about biochar. Biochar is super cool. I brought a test bag. You guys can take a look if you want. Yes. Biochar. This stuff's pretty cool. This is the smallest bag that we sell it in, and then we sell it all the way to like big super sacks. And this stuff's cool. I'll hand it around so you guys can see. It looks like coffee, but it's not. There you go. Pass it around. So that is eucalyptus and wattle forest from Kula. So we basically cooked it down to its purest. That's 100% carbon. The process is called pyrolysis, where you basically carbonize biomass. And hardwoods is a really good way to do it. It's the same process as your campfire at home. You have a campfire, it burns to carbon, and then eventually the carbon burns to ash. And if you look at one little tiny microscopic piece of that, it looks like that. The guy that invented the 3D microscope lives on Maui, and I talked to him, and he took a 3D microscopic image of one granule biochar. Notice all the holes. It's like a pumice stone. And that's what makes it like super, super beneficial, is all the holes, right? That's not a fertilizer whatsoever. There's zero nutritional value to pure carbon, but we did add some probiotics to it, so there's something good that moved into it or whatever. But this is basically like a coral reef, right? Like you put a coral reef in the ocean, and then fish of all colors of the rainbow will move in and create a whole little system. This is the coral reef of your soil. So that's basically putting a coral reef in. And the cool thing about this, it's not a fertilizer. It's not gonna decompose. Like that is gonna go into your golf course or your plantings. It'll be there like 5,000 years from now. Like anthropologists will be like looking through Maui if people disappeared and find that and be like, oh, humans were here and they did agriculture. Seriously, like we found biochar in the Amazon basin, where like the Mayan temple people from 40,000 years ago, they basically found out that if you cook wood in pits and turn it into carbon, it's the most fertile soils in the world, because in the Amazon it's real acidic, but they're able to have huge civilizations grow with agriculture, and this is like the birth of agriculture is using carbon. So we didn't invent this process. It's been here for a really long time. We're just waking it up and repurposing it for the best possible use in our landscaping practices. But this is also a natural process that happens when you have a forest fire. The Kula fire, Lahaina fire, like all the charcoals that are in the ground is basically this same exact process that happens naturally. So we're doing it, and we're accelerating that process and packaging it so you can put the benefits of a wildfire right into your garden. Because after those big fires in California happen, what happens 2-3 years later? You have this amazing forest that explodes from it. So it actually helps increase the health of your ecosystem if you have fires. And this is why. So this is our facility. This is kind of like a mid-level facility. We could go really big, but it's like $1 million investment. So we're not there yet, but we're in the middle of the eucalyptus forest where the feedstock is all around us. Because it takes a lot of money to like drive logs from here to there. So we decided to put our facility right in the center of that gigantic eucalyptus forest. And this is Atom retort kiln. Usually it's just one unit, but we decided to do 2 units that share a chimney stack. And we can basically take 3 cubic yards of biomass, like 3 Ford F-150s, and fill up into one of those units, and it'll cook down to 1 cubic yard. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio. We use the process chimney heat to dry wood. So we'll fill both of those units with wood. And while we're turning this into biochar, we're sending heat into the other side, and we're drying the wood out because you need to get the moisture out of the wood in order to carbonize. And then we have these fancy radiator coils, and that actually traps all of the steam and the smoke, and we run it through the condenser unit, and we extract a liquid wood vinegar out of it. And that's actually an organic insecticide and an organic pesticide. And it's great. You can actually use that as insecticides and foliar spray it if you have pest problems, even at resorts and stuff like that. So that's just kind of like the functionality of it. We're going to do workshops, and we'll invite you guys up to come and actually check it out. It's kind of a fun process. So the benefits of biochar, it's a permanent additive, meaning that'll be there for thousands of years. So when you put it into your landscaping, it retains moisture. So you can actually reduce the cost of irrigation by installing biochar. And you know, it's a really expensive process for us to get the labor to do it. And you know, a bag like that at the store is $30. You can buy a gigantic sack of it. But if you buy it and implement it, it's kind of one and done. So it's actually worth the investment because you can turn down your water bill. So you pay now so that you spend less over time, and eventually it'll pay for itself. Same thing with fertilizers. If you use conventional fertilizers, it makes your fertilizers last a lot longer, so you can reduce your fertilizer bill by installing biochar. Or if you wanted to do it right, you would stop fertilizers altogether and go with a 100% regenerative system that we'll kind of get into the introductory of what that is. It enhances conditions for attracting beneficial microorganisms, which is super important. It's a carbon sink, literally, like we're turning wood, making it into carbon, and we're sinking it physically into the ground. And it's a process of carbon sequestration. And if I were to triple my production, I could get carbon credits, but I'm not quite there yet. I need to make way more, but I could sell carbon credits on the market. It filters stormwater and retention basins. We worked with Goodfellow Brothers and McKenna Resorts, and they basically created a 500 square foot Brita water filtration system, like you have for your drinking water from your sink. They have that on stormwater. So as the stormwater comes down the mountain, it runs through that exact product before it goes out into the ocean, and it actually absorbs all the heavy metals and the fertilizers and all the runoff and stuff. So we can actually clean up the stormwater with it. Hopefully more people start implementing that in massive scale design. It can be a filter for septic systems and leach fields. And with some of the rebuilding of the homes, it's actually been utilized in that. It helps. It remediates heavy metal toxins in burnt house sites. And that's one of the programs that we've been doing, is working with people that have burnt houses. And because we have a temperature controlled unit and we use the hardest wood feedstocks like eucalyptus and wattle are really hard woods, it actually binds through like a magnetism almost, right? Like it binds the heavy metals. And like that's totally okay if it's like locked into the soil of your reconstruction site. It's good to be subsurface, but the heavy metals can give your kids cancer if like they're playing in the yard 5 years from now and that lead is exposed and it can leach away. But the biochar actually like binds it, and if it's subsurface, it'll stay there indefinitely. So that's, we work with an environmental engineer who works in strip mines in Minnesota. And after the Maui fires, he called me up and he's like, dude, get your biochar into the house sites, because in strip mining, like they expose the salt of the earth to the surface, and all those heavy metals, like there's way more heavy metals in strip mining than there probably is in the burnt house sites. And that's one tool in the toolbox that they use to remediate that stuff. There's other stuff like, compost teas that you can do for all the organics, but the heavy metals, that's the biggest problem for the toxicity in post wildfires. Like if you have a Tesla battery wall that just melted, that's like the most poisonous soil on earth, and you can use that to help. And my favorite part about biochar, it helps reduce odors in chicken coops. I have the best smelling chicken coop in Maui because I put biochar in it, and it's good for their bellies. Like they scratch around and they eat it. You can feed it to livestock. And actually what's in that bag is almost the same thing that's in an activated charcoal pill that you eat if you have food poisoning. This is just agricultural grade, like mass scale. But if you look at the ingredients of activated charcoal, it's basically charcoal and lactobacillus, and that's what we do in that bag right there. So you could theoretically eat a spoonful of that, but I wouldn't recommend it. So the challenges of biochar, it's labor intensive, trust me, I know. It takes a lot of physical movements and effort to do it, but you can do it yourself. Like if you want to go into a rabbit hole, go to YouTube and look up how to make biochar. You could go for like years of all the different methods, but you can do it yourself with a coffee can with a couple pukas in it and set it into a campfire. And your wood inside the coffee can will literally turn into charcoal. And that's the same exact process that I'm doing. We're just doing it at an industrial scale. It's also dangerous. You're dealing with fire. And we have a lot of fires around, so if everybody like in fire-prone zones started making their own biochar, it could be dangerous. So just make sure that if you're going to make biochar, you have a lot of water and you're just very careful, because I'm not promoting you to just start fires all over Maui. It's also really expensive to import. So the best biochar, like people are like, oh, sell your biochar in Wisconsin or California, and I'm like, you can buy it in Wisconsin and California. Like that defeats the purpose. We're sequestering carbon here, but we're going to burn twice the carbon to get it to somewhere else. Like they can make it and use it there. We can make it and use it here. And the whole reason why we did this, in 2021, actually 2020, the world shut down, right? And everybody in Maui became a gardener, which was great. You're at home and you're caring for your land. I go to the store like Kula Hardware and I couldn't buy any soil. And then I go to Lowe's and I couldn't buy any soil. Like everybody bought all the soil. And we're like, Maui is addicted to mainland dirt to grow everything. Like everybody in the landscape industry here, how much of your products are imported that you use? A lot of it, yeah, like 99%. And that's what's like, oh my God, we don't need any of that. Like keep it there. Like we can wake up our soil here and make it amazing and make it better than with just throwing imported stuff on it. Like, but it just takes the whole entire process of the system. And that's why we started our biochar company, because what's resiliency and a healthy garden? You can do it right now so that during the next pandemic or the next reason why tourist shuts down, like we already have the soil that's thriving and amazing and we can feed ourselves. Like food security starts at the root structure of the foundation. So now I'm going to move into the compost, right? So we have biochar, which is the coral reef. Then we have compost, which is the fish that'll colonize and move into the coral reef. We'll go through the actual processing of it. And the science behind compost. How many of you guys have tried to compost before? Yeah. It's fun, it's challenging. You have successes, you have failures. But basically the science is a C to N ratio, carbon to nitrogen, right? The simplest way to think about it is greens and browns. If it's green, it's nitrogen. If it's brown, it's carbon. And like it's like dead dry leaves that are in a pile. That's the carbon that you add. And it's like a 7-layer cake. You want to do layers of the cake. So this is the nitrogen there. That's the carbon there. Then more nitrogen, then more carbon. And then you have to keep it moist. But you're basically creating a living system that's going to heat up. And then the hotter that it gets, there's different little microbes that'll come alive and start eating once it's up to a certain temperature. And then if it cools down, then those will die off, and then another thing will take over. And there's another rabbit hole on YouTube. Just look up soil microbiology, and then talk to me in about a month. But this is what it is. This is a soil food web process. And so you have the spider web that holds it all together, right? That's the mycelium. And then you have all these guys, like worms will eat it, and then they'll poop. And then you'll have arthropods that'll eat it, and then protozoas will eat the arthropods. And then the bacteria will eat the protozoa that eats the arthropods. And then the nematodes eat the bacteria that eat the protozoa that eat the arthropods. And the best fertilizer for your soil is nematode poop. Like seriously, if you have as much nematode poop in your soil, your plants are thriving. And when you guys put granulated crystal conventional fertilizers, 90% of it goes away, right? But that little crystal thing that you just bought from Lowe's has to get eaten by that, and then that, and that, and that, and that. So your conventional fertilizer is literally nematode poop by the time the plant will eat it, right? So this system is so important for its functionality, even for conventional farming. So when you put your stuff on, 90% of it's in the ocean, and what stays is what's part of this whole system. And this whole system is what moves into the biochar. So that's what we're going for. Another thing I gotta say right out the gate is irrigation water. How many of you guys do you know have filtered water to keep the chlorine out? So chlorine water that comes from municipal sources is basically swimming pool water. And if you ever had a goldfish in a bowl, do you think that goldfish would live if you threw it in a swimming pool? Like, how long would it live? Gone. So you're throwing conventional products at a soil that you're poisoning with chlorine water. So the nematode poop will never happen, and you're basically wasting all of your money with putting the stuff on the soil. Like, it might get a little tiny bit of the stuff, but what you're really trying to do doesn't exist if you chlorinate your soil. So the first step in all of it, besides the biochar, because the biochar will just help water retain, but if you get those, it's as simple as like a little plastic $30 filter that runs through charcoal that keeps the chlorine out. And then it's like when it rains, right? Your garden actually grows. But if it doesn't rain and you're like watering it, it's just like barely living because you're basically dumping swimming pool water on your garden. And that one little thing makes everybody go, oh my God. Like, I've been, even myself, until I started a biochar company, I started thinking about this. That one little aspect of filter your chlorine out of your water first, and then you'll have way more success, even if you don't do any of this stuff. Because you need this living system to be able to take that granulated crystal piece of whatever from Lowe's and turn it actually into something that plants can eat. It's bioavailable. You need bioavailable nutrients. So I love microscopes. This is what the fungal network looks like. And I just like this stuff. So this is an old growth forest, right? So if you go hiking through Waikamoe, or even at the Skyline site that I have now, and you lift the leaves and you can see that with your eyes, it's right there at the surface, right? That's the best thing ever. Like, all the plants that you're putting into your landscaping, like exotic whatever, think of that exotic flowering plant in its native habitat where it was once an old growth forest. And then you peel up the leaf litter and you see that. That's how your plants will take care of themselves. Plants don't need fertilizers. Plants need a system that they can feed themselves with. That's a regenerative system. It's a system that gets better over time if you put the right elements together and you don't poison it with chlorine water. But this is something that happens naturally. Like, you don't have to go to an old growth forest and fertilize an old growth forest. It creates everything in itself to make the best possible conditions for its own existence. That's what we're trying to mimic in our landscaping practices. It's biomimicry, but we've reduced that whole system by raking our leaves. It boils down to what Sarah was talking about with like the great landscape. You know, you have grass with a plant in the middle of it. You basically have a biological desert that you're dumping chlorine all over the place, and you're removing the ability for that natural system to ever exist. So the only thing you can do is throw treatments at it and use your company credit card and go to Lowe's and buy some stuff and throw it at it. And it's basically reactionary. You're like, oh, there's a brown spot on my grass. Let's throw stuff at it to make it green again. But you're not treating the symptoms. You're putting a Band-Aid on something that's never gonna work. So until you create that system. However, we can't let leaves sit on the resort, right? What do you do in the morning? You fire up the leaf blower. You're like, bah! And you clear it all off because all you can have is green and that tree. So that's why we need to figure out innovative ways to hyper localize those systems so that that food and stuff can live in those spots, right? Like, this is how it has to be at resorts. You can't let leaves sit there and decompose and have that system happen naturally. So that's why we've come up with like the biochar, because you can kind of supercharge those crystals and impregnate them. And as long as you don't put the chlorine water on it, like, you can create a little hyper micro tiny little ancient old growth ecosystem with those practices. And that's kind of what we're going at for a regenerative system. If you do it right, you could totally cut all of your fertilizer costs and a lot of your irrigation costs. And that's really what resort managers, you hit them in their pocketbooks, right? It's like, okay, it's gonna cost an extra $100,000 in year one to implement all these practices, but year 2, 3, 4, 5, eventually, what if you could just unplug your entire fertilizer cost? So it's like that timeline where you have to invest. And when you invest, you gotta go and you gotta stick with it. Otherwise, it's not worth the time and the energy. But if you do stick it out and you can replant that whole system, it'll take care of itself. And then you guys can drink some coffee and you don't have to work quite as hard. Here's just like a example of one garden that I took out of a permaculture book. And this is kind of a cool thing. In the center is the compost pit. And then there's banana trees that are all around the compost pit. And it creates shade for the compost, and the roots kind of grow into it and helps kind of till it up a little bit. But all the rubbish from the garden goes into the compost, and the bananas and all like you get the brown leaves that you got to cut off all the trees. Well, all the browns can go into there, and then all the weeds and stuff are the greens. So you can do that whole C to N ratio, like 7-layer cake in the center of it. And then you have your gardens in these keyholes all around it. So this is just one example of a regenerative garden system where you don't have to take it off property. It's actually kind of a beautiful thing, and you integrate your compost kind of in the center of it. So the best practice is prepare your ingredients, chop it up into little pieces. You want to stack the brown stuff that dries, like let it just dry in a pile till it's good and brown, and then you just want to like fully layer it. And then for optimum fungal dominance, and that's why I was talking about that mycelium, the white spiderwebby stuff. You can hyper supercharge your compost with fungal dominance if you go with 80% brown to 20% green. 80% brown, 20% green, and then keep it moist, and then flip it over 5 times in 15 days. But that's kind of like scientifically, they figured it out for like to make a fungal dominant compost pile, because that compost is the best way to get that system going so that all those little critters can start that that food process. And actually, you guys will have a talk tomorrow, I think, from Char O'Brien. She's like compost tea lady, and like she'll go super deep dive into all this stuff. So this is just like an intro, but now you'll have kind of a base understanding of what that whole system is all about. So you can do this in your backyard. The benefits of small batch, you can basically make the highest quality compost ever, better than anything you could ever buy in the store if you do it yourself. If you buy a bag of compost at Home Depot, it was made industrially somewhere in Kentucky or wherever, and it's sitting in a plastic bag, and by the time it goes from the compost facility to your garden, most of that biology is completely dead because it's living in a plastic bag. So a compost is a living system. That's the benefit. Otherwise, it's just soil substrate. There's a difference between compost and just dirt, basically. So if you do the composting at home, you can control what goes in and out. So I would never take a castor bean plant in Kula and put it in my compost pit because those seeds will never die and you'll spread it everywhere. And that's why it's kind of dangerous to import compost, like even from Maui Eco right now. Back in the day, Maui Eco used to actually mix it with human waste. And it's kind of gross, but Department of Health, they had to cook it at 190 degrees for like 30 days or something like that. So it basically cooked everything. And by the time it was done, you were buying compost, but there was no compost in it. You were basically buying like dead, dry dirt substrate that's completely dead of all life. But all the poop is gone, but it also kills all the invasive weeds. So there's a lot there. Decentralized hyper-localization of green waste and food scraps is really key. Like West Maui Green Cycle is West Maui, really cool program. I don't think they commercially sell their product right now, but they are removing a lot of food that would otherwise go to the landfill. So they're doing a really good thing, and that's kind of the West Maui's compost, but we're really lacking a major composting facility that is biosecure right now. So it's kind of for homegrown composting, but there's a lot of resources there too. So yeah, the challenge of home composting is the visual impact for the neighbors. It's labor intensive to take a pitchfork and turn it over 5 times in 15 days. It kind of hurts your back a little bit. If you have a tractor or machine, it's actually kind of fun. But it can attract rodents, little mice and critters and cats and stuff like that. Smell, if you don't do it right, it'll get pilau, and that could be kind of a problem. Or if you do like mass scale kind. But you can actually reduce it by putting biochar into your compost, and it'll reduce the odors. Some food scraps are bad for aerobic composting. Like you don't want to put meat or bread or rice or anything like that. And it's also a vector, depending on what you're doing, but I mean, it's papaya seeds like to grow out of compost, and tomatoes, and it's not bad if you're at a resort landscape, like if you have a tomato growing, like you just take it out or whatever, but for like landscape scale native habitat restoration, it would be really bad if we had lilikoi growing in ancient ecosystems. So the industrial composting process, I talked about that a little bit. It's kind of big time, but we don't really have a proper resource happening in Maui right now. I know they're working on it at the county level, so hopefully they'll get it dialed in. Fingers crossed. So the challenges of industrial is the quality of the end product. They have to cook it, like I said, so hot for so long, there's no food web left by the time it gets done cooking. So, and also it can be super compacted. Like I used to go to Kihei Compost or the Eco, and I would put it in the soil, and it would like compact the soil because there's a lot of clay in it and stuff like that. So there's a lot of inconsistency in these large scales, and it also stinks. Like drive past the composting in California, and it's kind of stanky. There's another way that food scraps can be dealt with, like on another hyper-localized bokashi. They do this in Japan, like in Tokyo, almost everybody has this bokashi. It's like a sawdust that's saturated in the lactobacillus, which is the same biology that's in the biochar bag. It's a probiotic. And this is actually not a composting process. This is a fermentation process. So, and the cool thing about this is you can put meat and bones and whatever, bread, like all of your food waste, you can put into a bokashi bucket. And then you want to get it airtight so that it's not like an aeration. It's basically a bacterial, you're pickling it. It's like pickling pickles. You're pickling your food waste. And we've been doing it at our house for like the last 3 years. And we've had like 0 food going into the landfill. And literally like old steak bones and whatever can go into it. And it's, you could do it on a local level, like in a resort or whatever, with all the food scraps. So that's kind of a cool thing to look into. And this is everything that I just said, pretty much. You can do it with a 5-gallon bucket with a lid. That's all you really need. And super cool. We're food waste free in my family. That was a lot of information. Thanks for drinking out of the fire hose. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
I have 2 questions, please. The granular biochar that you guys have, do you, like in native plants, would you just broadcast that topically?
Yeah, so if your plant has already been planted in the ground, yes. You can put it, especially the granulated kind, because it's real small. But then I would still try to cover it up with some sort of compost or ideally wood chips. Because what you want is the biochar to be subsurface a little bit, protected from the sunlight. The biochar won't really have any benefit if it's just sitting at the surface. But I was just doing a bunch of research about golf courses and lawns and top dressing methods. And what they recommend, like if you're doing it on turf grass, is to mix it with either sand or compost and mix it up. And then you can broadcast it like out of a fertilizer spreader and then irrigate. So you try to get it to sink down in. But they found that biochar, if you have it, roughly like 2 millimeters is the ideal size. So all that stuff we run through sifters so that all the big chunks are out of it. And that's all kind of uniform, like black sand beach, little kind of that stuff. And within 1 year, it'll work itself 3 inches into the soil. So, so you can apply it. You really only need to apply it like a couple times, but apply it to especially if you have like brown spots that are always turning brown, like just try it, like treat the area. Don't expect it to work overnight. This is a long-term implementation and impregnation of a system. And like I said, if you're dumping chlorine water from a municipal source, you're not going to have any biology. So the only benefits of biochar at that point would be for moisture retention. So if it's a notoriously dry spot, then yeah, you get the biochar down in there. But
What about if you're planting?
okay, yeah, so the best time to put the biochar in the soil is at the time of plantings because you want it right where the roots are going to be touching. So you want to get it subsurface. Application rates are really good, 10% biochar to 90% planting substrate. So you can mix it into compost or even dig the hole and then put the biochar into the dirt that's in the pile and then put it back in the hole. You really want to get it all around that root system because the biochar granules are going to work as those little apartment complexes for the whole food web. And you really want to get those nematode poops like right at the roots because that's where they're going to absorb all the good stuff. Those beneficial microbes do happen in nature, but in our acidic soils or our clay soils, our sandy soils, if those are there, they just sheet away and they go away somewhere else. So the biochar is a way for them to kind of magnetize and hang out there. But if you do that process correctly and you get the biochar subsurface, and you don't chlorinate the plantings, like over time, it will get better over time. Your soil will increase by itself over time. And I've noticed that I did a bunch of research about conventional corn farming in Iowa, and they did full-on, full-scale corn farming. Year number 1, they got like a 8% increase in yield. Year number 2, they had a 30% increase in yield. By year number 5, they had like a 80% increase in yield. So it's really a long-term thing. And some people are so short-sighted, they're like, oh, just throw it in there, and oh, it didn't work. Oh, that's a failure. Like, no, like, try it out over time. There's a famous surfer Paige Alms, who has been using our biochar and our compost teas, and she planted this Simone coconut in Haiku at her farm, and then she donated one to her neighbor, and she's been doing all the implements, and the neighbor didn't have any of the biochar or anything. Her Simone coconut's like 10 times the size of her neighbor's. So she's like, that stuff totally works. So.
Just to make a suggestion, if you're going to be applying this to a lawn, do it right after aeration.
Yep.
That'd be the general rule of thumb.
Exactly.
You aerate, it opens up the pukas, you apply this, it gets it subsurfacing immediately.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Definitely. Cool. Well, I got a lot of other information.
She had
Oh,
two questions.
go ahead.
Hey, can I just ask one more?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, when you mulched those, the ravine, the steep slopes, what was your theory about how did that stay and not wash down?
I think it's a few different factors. Number one, it's basically like not in the bottom of a drainage already. Like what we did is we clear cut an entire hill slope that hilled down and then it sloped down. And then by building those log terraces, we're reducing the water from even sheeting fast into the thing. Because if you just broadcast mulch all over a slope, water's gonna go down, it's gonna find a path, right? And it'll create a little rivulet. If you can keep that from happening with the log terraces, I think that's the most successful for there. But we're seeing even in like the Kula area, like we'll broadcast it on an entire slope and we just don't have the logs to do it everywhere. And some of it will blow out. There's a few that'll just kind of like go out, but the majority of the landscape stays in place.
Yeah, I can also just share that I think the key is the amount that you use. If you just are shoveling some wood chips by hand, that'll wash away. So using a mechanical, in this case in Joe's Skyline and in a couple of our more successful fire recovery areas, we're just shooting it onto the land from the grinder itself. And then it's heavy, right? There's a certain density that makes it sort of heavy on the land. And it makes it much harder, and it locks things in because it's heavy, right? And so that kind of locking in process means the water is invited to go downward because it's not taking anything, the speed is not picking up as it goes across the chip. The other thing on Joe's property that I just noticed is that because he's using the machine to shoot the chips, like you saw in his image, it almost creates terracing on its own because of gravity. So I can see areas where like it's thicker in that spot, but it's kind of created a little plateau on its own. And so it's not like you're not looking at something that is just hugging the land. It almost has its own lumps, which then they sit on a larger pile. So it almost creates the log erosion idea, but with chips.
Yeah, you need to do enough to where it's heavy enough to really like lock it
It
in.
almost creates a little swale.
Yeah.
Typically within 30 to 90 days, you're gonna have mycelium.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a
Tons of
sudden that
activity
just
at the
sticks
bottom.
together. You can
Yeah.
literally pick up a chunk of that stuff and
Yeah.
hold it in your hand, it won't fall apart.
Yeah, it'll eventually
Yeah.
glue itself to the soil.
Lose itself.
And also the shape we've noticed, like a conventional wood chipper will give you like a nice, beautiful round chip. But if you use a horizontal grinder or a mastication process, it's more shards, and those shards lock in better. Because after the Kula fire happened, the burn area response team of the U.S. Forestry Service came up and did an assessment, and that was one of the recommendations that they made for post-wildfire recovery on steep slopes, is using a masticated shard of a chip instead of the circular ones. We've used both, and we've had success with both, but the circular wood chips, are really good for gardening. Yeah, they're more likely to, it doesn't lock in as quite as much.